Oh, hello, Estes Valley patrons. My name is Karen. I'm part of the program team at the library. And I have my special guest, Hannah from Estes Park School District, here again to talk with us about strategies for difficult moments and some grounding tools. Hannah, what do you got for us today?
Yeah. Hi, Karen. Hi, Estes Valley. Thank you for having me back. Um, my goal today is to give you some really tangible skills and tools to use when things get difficult, especially in times like these. So I am the mental health clinician for Estes Park School District. That means I work at all three of our school buildings, kindergarten through 12th grade. I work individually with students and families, and I also do referrals, case management, things like that. Um, right now I'm doing a lot of the same stuff, but I'm also happy to be making these psychoeducational videos as well. For grounding skills, just diving into this, it's very individualized. So what works for me will not necessarily work for you, and what works today might not necessarily work tomorrow. So I think one thing to keep in mind is that this is a very specific practice and that it can change too. So you got to be willing to experiment a little bit and think outside the box. Trying new things is really key. I think there's a list of things that we all think of like, oh, well, go outside, get exercise, do a coloring book, different things. Like, if it doesn't work for you, don't waste your time doing it. Use strategies that are actually helpful for you, and it totally looks different for everyone in the moment. So just honor those differences for yourself. I'm going to kind of take us through some different tiers of an emergency or a crisis or a tough situation. So we're going to go kind of from the tippy top, so like a code red situation, all the way down to baseline things that we can do every single day to benefit our health and wellness. So code red would be that 1 in a million situation. This is an emergency situation where you need to call 911. Hopefully it doesn't happen very often for many people, but this is a situation, if it is code red, this is something you call 911 for support for, or go to the emergency room. I know during these times that the list of questions you ask yourself to go to the ER is a little bit different than it was previously or might be going forward, but I still want to push people to seek out those services if needed. Like, healthcare workers are doing everything they can to make that a safe space, and resources are available. So if you need them, please access them. I will say a lot of people experiencing panic attacks end up in the ER. That's actually a very common place for panic attacks to be seen because they are so severe. Oftentimes people think they might be having a heart attack or seizure, about to pass out. That's what a really legitimate panic attack looks like. The silver lining of that, it won't kill you. It's horrible to go through. It's really scary and can be life altering, but you do survive it. And just know too that most panic attacks on average last about 7 minutes. So this is something that is really severe, peaks, and then goes downhill. If you're having anything that is still feeling severe but lasts longer than that, then you're probably not having a panic attack, but just really severe anxiety symptoms. So that might help you gauge whether you're like in a code red situation versus maybe something code yellow, where it sucks, it's unpleasant, it's uncomfortable, but you can stay home and use some of these skills and strategies to cope with. Um, so moving down to code yellow, I know I set a pretty high precedence for what's code red, but code red is really 911, you need help immediately. A lot of other stuff can be in between, especially right now when the healthcare system is so stretched. Some outside resources for different levels of crises. So this yellow line would be the Colorado Crisis Line. So if you don't have an outside counselor or doctor, or this is on the weekend or 2 a.m., which is when a lot of these things happen, please feel free to utilize these resources. Colorado Crisis Line offers free confidential services. They can direct you to other services, and they can just chat with you for a while and try to get you calmed down, or call in outside help if necessary. The phone number for them is 1-844-493-8255. 8255, or you can even text them, or you can chat with them online. If you want to text with them, text TALK, TALK, to 38255. We also have a really great local resource here in the Valley called Estes Valley Crisis Advocates. They're free, confidential, and 24/7, and still operating right now. Their phone number is 970-577-9781. So some things that these folks can help you with is suicide ideation, severe anxiety, things of that nature, depressive thoughts, maybe dealing with substance addiction, abuse, neglect, issues like that. Severe anxiety might be something like hyperventilating, heavy breathing, increased heart rate, racing thoughts, etc. I know that's what a lot of students and people I work with battle with. Things to keep in mind, again, with these code yellow situations, it's uncomfortable, yes, not fatal though. You, or maybe this is a loved one you're helping through, they'll make it through this. It's going to be okay. When you get into situations like this, I kind of think of it as like a hill and a valley. If someone's ticking up, they tick so far up, sometimes you can't just stop it. They got to ride the ride down. And unfortunately, there's no like silver bullet solution to, if someone's crying really hard, saying like, hey, please stop crying. That's not going to make them stop crying. That won't work necessarily. So I don't have that perfect solution to give you that will be like, oh, this will fix the hyperventilating right away. But working on these things and acknowledging this might take like 5 to 10 to 20 minutes of someone doing the same thing to get their symptoms to reduce. And it might happen again. Oftentimes when people experience a panic attack or really severe anxiety, it actually does end up happening again. One, because the brain kind of works itself into pathways. So once you've gone down a path, it's easier to keep following that same path. So that's why a lot of therapy and helping professions, it's like rewiring your brain. But also because like anxiety symptoms, panic attacks, these really severe emotional times are super scary. They're super uncomfortable. And having the anxiety builds anxiety. And then you have fear of it happening again. And then you build and build, and then it happens again. So sometimes even just the fear of it happening again makes it more likely to happen again. So being mindful of that while you work through this with someone, and keeping in your mind like, oh, this is something I can use if this happens again, or I would like to change this if this happens again, or do it a little differently. So if you're in one of these code yellow situations, or someone you love is in one, be it a child or an adult, here's some things that you can do in the moment that I hope you find helpful. And again, everyone's a little bit different, but some of these are pretty good in a pinch. So breathing of any kind is especially good to start with. Just focus on your breath. Again, telling someone to calm down when they're excited, not super helpful. Telling someone who's crying to stop crying, not super helpful. Letting them ride the ride and go through it, giving them some time, like, hey, just focus on your breathing right now. Can you breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth? Okay, now that they have that, can you increase your exhale to longer than your inhale? Or even just starting to count the breaths. We call that square breathing. So, okay, breathe in for 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's go to 6. 1, 2, 3. Counting the breaths is really grounding. And when I talk about grounding, it's something that brings you back into your body, back into the moment. Oftentimes in crisis situations or really high stress situations, our brain has a tendency to kind of pop out of our body a little bit, and we just start spinning and spinning instead of being here in the moment where things are actually physically okay. But in our brain, we're going through life and death situation. In our body, if we can get back there, our body helps remind us like, hey, I'm actually doing okay here. Our brains aren't the smartest sometimes. An app can be really beneficial. There's a lot of different apps on your phone that you can get. I use the Calm app. There's different things like a squishy ball or a candle if you have that in the room, like trying to make a candle flicker. Now breathe in. Now try to make the candle flicker, but don't blow it out. Or breathe into this ball and squish it down. Now inhale, exhale. You can get creative with almost using some props or things that you have in your immediate physical space. Another grounding technique I like to use, it's called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So again, if someone's really in their head, they're or upset, crying, like, hey, let's get back into this room. List 5 things you can see for me. Oh, well, yellow wall, da da da. Okay, what are 4 things you can hear? What are 3 things you can touch? What are 2 things you can smell? And what's 1 thing you can taste? And you can see after walking through those things, that helps bring people down a different level. And now, okay, I'm back into the room. Tapping is also another grounding technique. Tapping is basically tapping a bilateral stimulation. So it's very powerful. Basically, tapping is walking. You know how everyone's like, oh, well, go take a walk. And even studies show after 10 minutes of walking, your brain processes stuff, you feel physically better. It's that bilateral brain stimulation that helps you. So you can go for a walk, which again, that'll help you. You can also simulate tapping when you can't go outside by tapping your toes back and forth. And again, this is getting your brain hemispheres to talk to one another. There's a type of therapy that processes trauma that's called EMDR that's based on this bilateral stimulation. It's really interesting that you can process a lot of emotions subconsciously without needing to delve into that trauma consciously, but your brain just kind of automatically processes that. So we can help our brain process through these difficult emotions with bilateral stimulation. So walking, tapping your toes, tapping your hands. Or even if you have a little kid, this is called the butterfly hug, and they like to do this. So you make a little butterfly and you can tap. And breathe. Some other good grounding techniques could be exercise, coloring, listening to music. If you have a playlist ready, like, oh, here's my happy playlist for when I'm feeling down. Spending time with a loved one or a loved animal, a furry friend, anything that's helpful to you. But if you're having something very severe in that yellow category, I would always recommend starting with focusing on breath and then taking it into like physical environment and then some of these other techniques. One thing that's really important to keep in mind is that someone who is really escalated and like hyperventilating, crying, super upset, like if it was an argument or something happened, like when someone's in an escalated state, it's not a great time to talk about, well, what could you do differently? Because really the brain's not online at that time. If you are in such a hyper aroused state, your prefrontal cortex isn't online, which is the part of the brain that helps us process critical thinking. So if you're working with a kid who got in a fight with their friend and they're just bawling, like now's not a good time to be like, well, you and so weren't really getting along. Like, could you go hang out with? Not a good time for a big conversation when anyone is in a state like this. Give it an evening, talk about the next day, but just let someone settle down and get regulated again. Going down to kind of that base level. So again, I mentioned the ride thing. It's kind of like a roller coaster. Oftentimes we can feel ourselves kind of ticking up that rung, like tick, 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 tick. And sometimes you just have to ride the ride if you get up high enough. So what I call like foundational or like a code green level things would be like, what do you do to maintain not getting up too high on that ride? Like, how do you not ride the ride? How do we keep ourselves well? I love the saying that humans are basically houseplants with more complicated emotions. Like, remember, we're animals. We need to like take care of our bodies because our physical state has a huge impact on our mental state and vice versa. But eat well, Eat regularly, try not to have a ton of nasty foods for you, stay hydrated, getting outside in the sunshine, doing a little bit of activity. Those are great skills that give you the best chance to be regulated day by day. And taking care of your emotions, it's kind of like physical therapy. Like if you broke your arm, you would have physical therapy exercises. And even when your arm feels good again, you should probably still do those exercises to keep it strong. Same thing with emotional health and behavioral health. Like if you had a bad day, that's a good sign. So what do you do to maintain that? And you still got to do those things even when you feel well to keep yourself on that even playing field. So it's kind of giving yourself the best shot that you can. And there's some things that only you have control over. So you have to take ownership and responsibility for those things you do daily. Um, I did setting boundaries and creating routines video at the library. I highly recommend you checking out. I think a wellness routine is really important, especially at times like this, to maintain because all of our stress levels are escalated. So we really need to keep our baseline, and also recognizing too that because everything's escalated, like our baseline has gone up a little bit, or maybe those skills that, gosh, like every time I took a run before all this, like I always felt better. Now I don't feel that good after. Well, it might be a time to change your strategy, or just acknowledge too, like the running is probably still the same amount of helpful. It's just that much more stress on top of everything else. So is there something else you can do to take care of yourself in a way to compensate for that? Keeping in mind right now, across the board, stress levels are high, from kiddos who are doing online school to the first time to adults who are unemployed or trying to help a spouse, or people looking for food, water, and shelter. So give yourself and those around you some extra grace. Sometimes not the best version of ourselves comes out in time of stress, and it's okay acknowledging that and trying to do better next time, and building on that. Also, know there's so many resources out there for you, even still. There, one thing I am just super impressed with is our community and how much a lot really hasn't changed. Like the way things are delivered are a little different, but the resources are still there. Like Estes Valley Crisis Advocates, all the counselors I know are still working and just doing behavioral sessions via the telephone or Zoom or Google Hangouts, whatever you need. All the police, churches, different places, they're still there. It's just we're doing it in a different way. So please reach out, engage in social media, engage in your community to try to keep yourself in that green zone. And know that we're all in this together. That's what I had prepared. Are there any questions, Karen?
No, I really appreciated what you were saying because I have been a long distance runner and I've tabled it for a while and I keep going back and forth and back and forth, and it's something to do, but it's definitely not filling that hole that I've had as a past runner. So out of the blue, I picked up a 1,000-piece puzzle, and that's what's been keeping my mind, that spinning that you had mentioned, and trying to uh, bring it to a different level. Like you mentioned, the baseline. Yes, it probably was here for the longest time, and now it's, some days it's here. And finding those little things, even if it's, I've definitely upped my cooking game, that's for sure. And just finding little things to find some joy in, and yeah, those are really good. And as Hannah had mentioned, several resources. I will put those in the comments for us, so that if you miss those, the text line or the phone numbers, I'll have that available for you. So yeah, we'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you.